Hi Anastasia, nice to meet you. My name is Penny, and I know we have been sending email back and forth several times, and I am so excited to have you here. I have been like really into this movie since last year, and really trying to get it to campus, get everybody to watch it, and have you come over and talk to us since last year.
Oh,
And
thank you.
with the pandemic and everything, it has been a little bit crazy. But it's finally happening, which I am so excited. So I think I'm just going to let you introduce a little bit about yourself, about the movie. Like tell us a little bit more about like what you want to share, and then we can get into some questions.
Of course, of course. And Michael told me actually just before we started that you were pushing the film for more than a year and really like enthusiastic and wanted everybody to see it. So thank you so much. And it's always so important for us to see people who are moved by all these stories, and especially as the film was released last year in theaters 1 week before theaters closed all over the world. So it was really a difficult year for the film to be seen and shared by by the people all around the world. And finally it's happening little by little. And so every time I see someone so inspired, I'm so grateful. So this is why I'm here today. And to start, maybe I can explain how this whole thing started and what inspired us. So I did this film with a man. We're two co-directors. His name is Yann Arthus Bertrand, and he's quite a famous man actually here in France and internationally. He's a film director, photographer, an activist, etc. And together we did another film previously before Woman, which is called Human. And for this project, which is actually available online for free on YouTube in like 12 languages or something like that, and more than 100 million people from all around the world have already watched it, and it feels like the project a little bit. I can see your shaking. And so for these people, for this film we have interviewed really everyone, men, women, children, like everyone was concerned. And I did almost half of the interviews of the film. And there was really something that struck me during the shooting process. It was when we were like filming in a country, men would be easily proud to share their story. They would come to us and say, oh, you're making a film, la la la, do you know who I am? Let me tell you my story. And I'm not saying it in a negative way. It was really like we felt they wanted to share. Whereas women were more suspicious first. They would ask like, why are you doing this? What is it for? What are you going to do with this afterwards, etc. And but once they were in front of the camera, it was as if for many of them, it was as if they have been waiting this moment for their whole life. And as if everything they have kept inside for so many years could finally be released. And being on the other side of the camera, I almost physically felt that liberation. They kind of were freeing themselves of a weight of something that they have been keeping maybe inside for too long. And I have been doing this job like films based on interviews for more than 15 years now. And 15 years ago, in some countries, it was impossible to find a woman ready to talk in front of the camera, especially the way of a film, just the face, and like you can't confuse the person with someone else, you're not hiding anything. So you really have to assume what you're saying. And so in many countries, it was impossible to find a woman ready to do that for all the reasons you may understand of, cultural, traditional, etc., etc. And here we were, what it was like in 2013, 14, and women were ready. And so when we finished Human, it wasn't even us who chose to make this film. It was more or less obvious that the timing was right, because women needed a film like that to be heard and to be seen. And this is why we launched this project. And it was in 2015. So before the Me Too movement, before the Weinstein affair, and all the other, affairs that we are talking about in the media right now. And it's not to say that we were there before everyone. It's just because it was already there. And it was just like maybe a trigger point was needed to finally for women to be in the center of attention. And so when all of this media stuff happened, we were not at all surprised. We were already shooting interviews all around the world, and everywhere we felt that women wanted to be heard. And so just to sum up, it's a project for which we have done 2,000 interviews in 50 different countries. So it's really huge and very universal. And the whole idea was very simple and complicated at the same time. It was trying to understand what it means to be a woman in today's world and what place we women could have in tomorrow's world. And to do that, we kind of decided to address very different topics, starting from very personal, very intimate, and going on more socially, involved things, and politically even involved. And so talking about very intimate stuff like relationship we have with our bodies, sexuality, periods, things like that, but also talking about work, financial independence, but also talking about motherhood, but also talking about violence that women have to face all around the world, or things like rape as weapon of war. And so the whole idea of the film was to kind of try and find the right balance between these universal topics where everyone is concerned, and every woman, you, me, and every girl who's here with us today has a story to share. Because you don't need to have a specific story to talk about motherhood, to talk about sexuality, education, love, emancipation, or etc. And then more specific topics that we as directors, me and Jan, wanted to highlight. As I was mentioning, for example, rape as weapon of war. This is something right from the start. We wanted to show that there were still women in this world, in this modern world, that were sold, just against the package of cigarettes. How is it possible? And so that's what we tried to do. And the production lasted for more than 4 years, as I was saying. And so for a year we prepared the shootings, then for another 2 years we shot and we did the filming process all around the world, and then another year of editing, which is very long for a documentary. And I would say it was the most complicated, to kind of, once you have these amazing stories and all of them could be in the film and deserve to be in the film, how do you choose and how do you make like a barely 2-hour film? That was horrible. And so the film was released here in France last year on the International Women's Rights Day on the 8th of March. But then again, as I was saying, a week later, all theaters and cinemas are closed. And so we've been really doing as much as possible to make this project, visible and for people to watch it all around the world. And it has been released until now in more than 40 countries worldwide, whether it is in theaters or on TV or on a platform, really depending on the situation, So we're still there and fighting, because all of these women, I think, deserve to be heard. And that's the most important for us, that their voices, can resonate all around the world.
That is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Because originally I was like, actually my first question was to ask you how this movie started. Because I was just like very impressed when I first saw the movie, and I personally had so much connection with several interviews when women from China talked about their experiences and everything. But I know like everybody as women all has some connections, one form or another, connected with the people in the movies and everything. I have first question for you. Can you, like, as a woman yourself, because I know you're working with and he is a man and you are a woman, like what is the differences like when you guys are talking to each other, going through like all of this complicated interviewing and editing process, like as a woman, like how do you feel different from a man? And then like, what did you find surprising or interesting through this process as a woman?
It's a very good question. Actually, it's interesting because we have been working with Jan for more than 10 years together, so and each of our project takes around 3 or 4 years. So, you make 2 films and another thing, and then it's already 10 years. Very, very simple, and very time is running really. And so, it's interesting because we have almost like a family connection now. We are really close beyond the work and beyond what we are doing, you know, for the cinema. And but it's a whole different thing that when we are making a film, which is called obviously Woman, and you have to decide what you have to choose and what you're going to talk about. Obviously, there were things on which we completely agreed right from the start, and we thought, okay, this is important. For example, talking about violence, we knew that in today's world, it was still crucial to show how much violence women have to face all around the world. This is something both of us, let's say, understood and really wanted to highlight in the film. But then when Jan talked about the film in the beginning, I remember all the time it was just about discriminations, about violence, about harassment. And, you know, it shouldn't be called woman. It should be like women that face the most horrible stuff around the world. And at a certain point, I told him, you know, if we want really to understand what it is to be a woman, we can't just talk about the bad stuff, about the difficult stuff. Obviously, it's there and it's important, but it's not only that, you know, woman's life is about, happily enough. And so I told him, I think it's crucial for me as a woman to go much more personal, much more intimate, and to talk, let's say, also, if we want to break taboos, it's not only taboos about the difficult stuff, it's also, let's talk about sexuality. You know, we never talk about orgasms. Why? What's bad about it? Why a woman can talk about her pleasure? Or let's talk about periods. And I remember the first time I told him, let's talk about periods, he made like eyes like that, like, I'm talking harassment, I'm talking violence, you're like, periods. Who's interested in that? You see the difference between a man and a woman? And this is a man who's 74-year-old, okay? And who has 3 sisters, a wife, granddaughters. I mean, he's surrounded by women, and he have never understood to that moment of his life why periods would be an important topic to talk about when talking about women. And so I remember I told him, you know, I will not explain this to you. I think we will just make some interviews. You will listen to them, and then we will discuss. And actually, once he have listened to those interviews, we would never needed to discuss it again. He understood. So conclusion, it's never too late for a man to change. And this is actually how we worked. And I also thought that it was really interesting. Well, actually, Jan did no interviews of this film because given the intimacy in which we were with most women, it would have been impossible for them to talk to a man about all this stuff, you know. So only women did the interviews. So I did a lot myself, but I also had an amazing team of 5 journalists who worked with us for more than 2 years of production, and who each of them talked a different language, like Spanish, you know, Japanese, Arabic, etc. And so they all did several hundred interviews also. And but then what happened is that we watched all of them together with Jan, and we would discuss each of them. And it was interesting because each time we would confront our points of view. And on some topics, as I was saying, we completely agreed, and the feeling was similar. We thought like, wow, this is crucial. This story we needed in the film. And on some topics, we completely disagreed, and we would be touched by very different stuff, you know. And this is also, for me, was really important, because I would think like, okay, why for me as a woman, this looks obvious. It's like crucial to talk about this. Why as a man, he's not touched at all? Why he's not understanding that this is important? How can I you know, address this or that topic to make him understand, as I was mentioning with periods, but with also there were some other topics for which it also, you know, it was like that. And so for me, it was like a kind of first test, you know, it was Jan, because I wanted this film to obviously to talk and to be seen and watched and resonate with women. And I was sure that women from all around the world would feel connected, as you were saying, to some of the women of the film. And obviously, given your own story, it can be completely different, you know, women and different stories. And that's the beauty of it, because there each time there is someone who you can connect to, and it depends really on also who you are. But I also wanted this film to be seen and understood by men, and not like, you know, we are making this project about women, only watched by women, and we're all together in the room discussing it and dot, you know. I don't think we will be progressing as a society in this world if we just do that. And so I really didn't want this film to be a kind of anti, you know, guys thing where they would be, okay, already the name woman, so it's not for me, you know, not at all. And this is why I think it was crucial that we do it together, a man and a woman of two completely different generations, you know, because I'm 38, he's 74. We have completely different backgrounds. I'm an immigrant here in France. He's really 100% French. And so the perception is also different. And so I think that the film is what it is because there are our two visions of the world that are kind of brought together.
That is so cool. Because like I didn't even think about like you guys also have age gaps and all of that thing. And that's like really interesting for the mixed perspective. And as audience, we are also watching the movie from different perspective. So you mentioned that you are doing a lot of interview. And I just want to ask, like, how did you conduct the interview? Like, did you come over any like difficult time? Because I know sometimes like all of those topics was very intimate. It's very personal. Like, how did you actually like get women to talk about those stuff and be okay in front of a camera, sharing like the deep, really personal things? I was like, when I was watching it, I was just like, some of this topic, I was like, I would never share in front of a camera about this thing. So like, how did you actually make them feel comfortable in the space and talk about themselves, like those intimate stuff?
So I would say that there are two keys to understanding our work, and they are completely connected. The first one is time, and the second one is trust. And to create trust, you need time. And so it wasn't like you see when you watch the film, you just see very short extracts, you know, like for 1 or 2 minutes, something like that. And it's already so powerful. But you have to imagine that it wasn't just we came there and after 5 or 10 minutes of conversation, we would go to those intimate and very personal stories. No, it took us more than 2 hours in general, and sometimes up to 3 hours to make those interviews. And it was really a long process. We took the time. And also, actually, what happened is that in every country where we worked, we had what we call a fixer. So it's a local journalist, also only women. So there was no equality on this film. It's like 80% of people who worked on it were women. And I'm very proud to say that because it's still not the case in cinema industry at all. And so what happened is that those journalists worked really for months and months in advance to prepare the shootings. And I remember it's funny because, you know, I hate the word casting. And when we started to work with each of them, they would, obviously they're professional journalists. So they would ask me like, what's the casting? What are you searching for? And I would like, okay, what age? Like younger girls or maybe older women? Both. Okay, maybe more from countryside or from big cities? Both. Okay, maybe like educated people or maybe more simple people, like all of them. Wow, where do you want me to start? You know, like how do I even start this? It's too too broad, too general. And the most important for us was to make them understand that it wasn't at all about this kind of criteria. It was more, as you were mentioning yourself, like I'm not ready to share this kind of intimate stuff in front of the camera. And that's okay. I mean, not everyone is ready to talk about the most personal in front of a camera. And so for us, the first criteria would be more about that, finding the women who would be ready and willing to talk about all of these personal stories, all of these personal memories in front of a camera. And the second thing, which was even more important, it wasn't even that, because, you know, it's one thing that to talk with someone just in a black room and you're just the two of you and having this very private conversation. And it's a whole different thing when millions of people from all around the world will watch it and will see you, and you have to assume what you have said. And so for us, this was crucial, that every woman who is part of the project is proud to be part of this project and wants to be there, and not like feeling, okay, they came, they did this interview, I don't even know what happened, and it was like, you know, and then they disappeared and I never heard from them anymore, and like, I don't know what my story became. Not at all. It was more like, okay, they came, but for months I was in contact with someone, I know what this project project is about. I've decided to be part of it, and I'm assuming my story, and I want to be part of this whole huge thing with many women from all around the world. And this is why also for many women, to be honest, I thought that many women would change their minds, because, sometimes, obviously, as I was saying, it lasted for 2 or 3 hours, and our interviews look more like a therapy session than an interview like what we're doing today, like a Q&A. It's more of when it worked, it was little by little, women would go deeper and deeper inside themselves, and they were not even talking to us anymore. It was as if they were talking to themselves. And so little by little, they would forget about everything and just focus on their own stories. And this is how they have shared things that many of them didn't expect to share at all. And so once it was finished, I thought, okay, maybe they just, rethinking about that, they would change their mind. And I would completely understand that, especially on the most difficult stories, and so many of these women, we have contacted them, because also when a production lasts for 4 years, I mean, you've done an interview, but maybe a year later or 2 years later, your life completely changes. So you don't want that story to be in the film. So we have contacted them and said, okay, we're editing the film now. This is what we're keeping from your story. Are you sure? Are you sure? Some of them, we have contacted them 2 or 3 times. And I thought that many would change their mind. Out of 2,000 interviews, maybe 15 women changed their mind on overall, which is nothing. And so when we're saying that women are ready and wanted to be heard, this is really something we have witnessed, because most of them, on the contrary, told me, no, I want to be in the film. I hope I will be in the film, and not at all like, oh no, I have doubts, etc. And so for me, it was a very powerful thing also to kind of to feel that, they shared their stories and they were there assuming those stories. And so this is why we thought, okay, this film needs to be, needs to exist and needs to be watched by as many people as possible, because women, have given us a lot. So it has to be like, not for nothing, and that's why we are pushing it so hard.
That is so awesome. Yeah, that's just super cool. So I'm going to ask this question, and then I will see if anybody else have any questions, because it's just me asking. I feel bad, but one of the things you mentioned before is that woman is an inspiration from humans, and you guys have been working on women because after humans, all the production, you think like women wanted to be heard, wanted to have a voice. So I just want to ask you, are there any inspiration after woman? Like, what is something that's like coming out of the production of woman? Are there another project that you guys are thinking about, or like, are there anything that you think that we would love to do, like after all the pandemic, of course, but yeah.
Well, what happened is that during the we were very frustrated not to be able to put all of the stories that we wanted to put in the film. So this is why we also worked on a book which was published here in France and some countries in Europe, but not yet in the US, but it will be, I know, at a certain point. And so with hundreds of other stories that are not in the film, but also with articles talking with, about difficult topics, different topics we're bringing on in the film, but analyzing them with a lot of data, with a lot of also men, stepping in and taking and having a voice on women and supporting women. And so that also took us quite a while to finish, and it was really important for us. And we started working on an exhibition, immersive exhibition, which is a completely different experience from the film, but then it was frozen because of the pandemic situation. And so we really hope to finish that exhibition, because it will be a completely different experience, and will also bring you in the midst of women's voices, but really in a quite beautiful and different way. And then while we were editing the film with Jan, quite often we were thinking like, and what a man would say, on that topic, how a man would react on that or that issue, because the public speech by men, we have it a lot, maybe at too much. But the private one, the intimate one, almost never. We almost never hear men talking about their sexuality, about their weaknesses, about the fact that, you know, they also right from their childhood, you know, are brought up as like the one who has to provide, who has to be the strong one. And a lot of men are not really feeling okay with that, but they almost never talk about that. And so we thought, wow, it would be interesting, or parenthood, for example, being a good father, etc. Yeah, it would be interesting to have men expressing their kind of intimate life. But then, you know, the films we're working on are really international and universal, and we travel so much. And for the moment, it's not really possible to do. And we have been suggested to make our interviews on Zoom, but I don't think that what we're doing can work on Zoom at all. You really need a, you know, a personal contact. You need to spend time with the people. You need to really create something with them. And it's the only way to have their trust and to, you know, and so this is why we're waiting for the situation. Let's say, maybe, I don't know if it will get back to completely normal one day soon, but at least when we will again be able to travel and to be with people in the same room without people being frightened, you know, etc. And so then maybe we will launch this project. And I'm also working on another film, which is a much more personal thing, but I can't talk about it right now a lot, but it's also inspired by women and by what I have learned from this project, obviously.
That's great. Looking forward to that. So I'm just gonna give like a minute-ish for everybody who has questions. Please, like feel free unmute yourself or put it in the chat. So the last question I actually want to ask you, I don't know if you heard much about this, but there is a very sad, upsetting murder like happened in Atlanta on women, and specifically to Asian Americans. And you have been making such an important film. And this is actually a question from Ding Merritt, which is our international office Ding, and she wanted to say, like, thank you so much for making this important film. As we are grieving for the murder victims in Georgia this week, including like 6 Asian women, is there like a message you'd like to share with women who live in fear after all of these killings?
Yeah, of course, that's completely, well, what can I say? It's really, really horrible what happened. But what I would say is that what I have realized by making this project is that quite often people reject what they don't understand and what they don't know. And we're often afraid of others who look different to us because we don't know them. And it's really, it sounds very like, you know, simple, but it's really something we have witnessed. Like I will reject that person because she looks different. I would reject that person because she has, you know, a different background, or she's visually different, or she's that or that. And once you break that barrier and you are just there, and that's what we are trying to do, and listen to other people, you realize that actually we are so much closer, you know, than we think, and we share so much more that we think. And so I think, and I know it's hard when you are going through stuff like that, and when a horrible murders with, you know, that can't be excused happen, obviously, and you may feel, you know, frightened, but also angry, and, you know, but I know that the only way to move forward, it's not to try and bring people against each other, because it can be working for a while, and that's what your ex-president tried a little bit to do and actually succeeded in a way. But it's not, there is no solution in that situation. So if the reaction is also, you know, fear, and is also rejection, you just reproduce it eternally. And what I have witnessed doing this all around the world, for example, countries that have been in war, of people from two, you know, let's say origins in the same country, who fought and who really eliminated each other for years. The only countries that managed to overcome this and to build something new were those who managed to bring a dialogue. And I think, and Rwanda, for example, is a great, really great example of that, because there was a huge genocide over there, and people really killed each other in terrific, circumstances, but then they did everything to make those communities come together again. And now that's the country where they have the most women in power in the world, in Rwanda, So it means that, for example, just to give an example, so it means that it's possible. And I know that right now it doesn't sound like something you may want to do, but at a long term, I think that's the only way, that people need to try and reconcile and at least try and have a dialogue. Because if it's just rejection of each other, it's not bringing you anywhere. But again, I understand that since it just happened, it's not something that may be, possible tomorrow, but maybe after a while, and, politically the situation is changing. And so I really hope that there will be more dialogue in the US, because this country, and for us, when we have done the interviews, it's one of the most amazing countries for, all of the people of all origins, all race coming in together and like living on this soil all together. And so, yeah, it's really sad to see that, just because of some, people starting to hate each other. And so obviously I'm with you. I'm really sorry for what's going on.
Yeah, thank you so much, though. That's a very strong message. So I think that's the end of our time. Thank you so much for joining us. And it was really an honor to learn from you and everything. I really appreciate the conversation.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to meet you and talk to you.
It's really nice for me too. And what I've learned, actually, maybe to conclude, let's say, our conversation, what I've learned by making this film, and it completely changed me and it completely transformed me, because obviously when you witness to 2,000 women who share the most intimate stuff that many of them have never ever shared with anyone in their life, and they trust you, it becomes a huge responsibility, because once you've heard all of these voices, you need to make them heard. And so you feel that kind of responsibility with you all the time. And what I've learned, me as a woman, from this project are two things. One is very negative, unfortunately, and one is very positive. And the negative one, by the way, is linked to what you've just said and asked, is the degree of violence women have to face, and let's say, the number of women who still face violence all around the world. And when we say that it's 1 woman in 3, it's really something that we have witnessed by making these interviews among the most powerful women, the most famous women, but also the most simple women, and the degree of violence was more or less the same. And let's say the way you address it and the way you're able to react to it is different because of the country you're living and what's the context is offering you, but the violence is there. And this is when we're saying that, oh my God, now women with all this stuff about violence, and they're talking too much about it and bringing it too much. I'm saying that we are not talking about it enough at all, given the degree of violence I have witnessed by making this project in 50 different countries. We should talk about it 100% more, or I don't know. It's like it has to be addressed. We are still not realizing how huge of a problem it is. But the other thing, which is really positive, actually, is the degree of resilience that women have all around the world. Resilience that women have, and I know it's like a little bit like a word that everybody's using right now, but the inner strength, not maybe the physical, but the inner strength that women have is beyond understandable sometimes. And I was in front of women who have been through wars, and I was there. It was unbearable to listen what they have been through, and they were standing in front of me saying, but I don't want to be seen as a victim. I don't want to be labeled as a victim my whole life, because I'm much more than that. And it's not because I have went through violence, etc., that I have to be labeled as a victim. And the degree of the level of resilience women have, for me, is just something, wow, it's beyond amazing. And actually, I think that we're not at all like conscious about that. And I think we don't realize actually how strong we are. And, we are not in a minority, we are half of the humanity. And I think the day women realize that we are half of the humanity and that we are strong and that we are able, well, the world will be a completely different place. And I'm really, really hoping that day will come very soon.